All right.
Okay, now we got a big one that generated a lot of traffic on the internet this week.
Yes. So, this is an article by our favorite, Peggy Fletcher Stack. Love her.
Salt Lake
Um,
Tribune.
yes. And it is exploring the culture with BYU professors right now at the university um, through their education commission. So it is a very long article. I would encourage, if you haven't read it, please go read it. There's so much information. So there is a commissioner of education, Clark Gilbert. He is a general authority, I think a 70, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he's a 70.
Anyway, and this is a position that I believe has been around for a while. This is not new, but it is part of the vetting process with professors. Um, Obviously, you have to have credentials to teach at BYU, and you do have to have an ecclesiastical endorsement, either from your bishop or, if you're not LDS, from your ecclesiastical leader. And you do have to ascribe to, it's not the honor code as the students, but there's a code that a professor would have
Yes.
to ascribe to. However, in recent years, this article has talked about that it's become a little bit more strict, for lack of a better way of putting it, or
Yeah.
I don't want to use the word strict. It's changed to a loyalty oath,
Yes.
that expecting to attest to their support of the church's position on marriage, family, and gender. And a lot of professors are beginning to feel this goes beyond the church's own stances and policies and is kind of um,
Orwellian
creating.
was how one of them described
Yes,
it.
Orwellian. It's taking, there's feelings that it's taking the church's stance and pushing it farther. To be completely honest, as I was reading this, I thought of a couple years ago when the stories were dropping about the honor code,
Hmm.
how the honor code was kind of being pushed a little farther than it probably should have been, and it got a kind of a hard look. Um, I think that was on this podcast that I heard that talked about, because I remember reading about
Yes.
that and finding it fascinating, because I didn't go to BYU. I didn't go to a church school. I stayed out here in Ohio. Um, I There is a lot in this article. Um, and I do have to say that before I talk about this, I part of me sees both sides. I
Hmm.
went to private religious school for 13 years. So the concept of you go to a school with a religious affiliation for a certain atmosphere, like I
Yes.
get that and I understand that. And I can see, like, if you're going to teach at BYU, you need to be ascribing to the and supporting the doctrines and things that the church teaches. That makes sense. That rings, that registers. But what is happening, some of these, there's multiple stories in here from former professors that are sharing stories where what they are being, like adjunct professors that are being non-renewed, or people that are just not being hired or not passing that level of hiring. um there's nothing strong that they can pinpoint. Like, they're like, oh, I wear a rainbow pin to class and I'm showing support for LGBT students, or I have children that are queer and I have posted about that on social media. One professor shared how he was struggling with he filled out the loyalty oath. He has a temple recommend. He's active in his congregation. He was discussing with his bishop just some concerns over, I'm trying to find it. This is such a long article. Um, just concerns over some church teachings that, that were affecting his family, and his wife was no longer attending over concerns with that. And just a conversation with his bishop. And a couple of days after that conversation, his ecclesiastical endorsement was revoked. And in my mind, if you can have a temple recommend, what is preventing you from an ecclesiastical endorsement? There seems like there's a disconnect. um and that's a little scary. It's interesting, and we're only getting part of the story here, but at the same time, this is I think this is big. This is something worth looking. um a lot of the issues that were brought up in this article centered around LGBTQ
Yeah.
issues. A lot of concern there. There was a music professor that talked about his experience and watching. And I thought that was interesting, because I've had, not nearly in the same way, but I have a little sticker in my classroom window. It's a rainbow flag and it says "Be safe," because my school were the bees, and
Hmm.
I have it up there with in alliance with the club at our school, that it's just letting my students know that my room is at least a safe space, that they will not be bullied, they will be respected. And if a student feels uncomfortable, I'm a teacher they can come talk to get pointed in the direction for help.
Yeah.
That's what that means. And I've had students who are members who've questioned me about that. Why do you have that in your window? We know the church is teaching, but we also know that the church is encouraging us to love one another. So there's levels to this. So it's very interesting. I liked towards the end, there were a couple phrases of this article that I think just get to the heart of the issue: behavior based versus belief based standards, and kind
Hmm.
of this going too far. And the author draws a conclusion, or not conclusion, a comparison looking at the new for the strength of youth standards and the way ministering is moving. And it is more about like our personal journey
Yeah.
and our relationship with the Savior. And he's not, the author was seeing this disconnect that, it's principle based living, personal responsibility. That's not present with what's going on right now with these professors. And my heart breaks for them
Exactly.
because it's just, it is Orwellian.
Yeah.
It's scary. This thought that, you can just be non-renewed. You can have the credentials. You can have your temple recommend. You can have everything in place. But then this educational commission can nix you because, and they don't have to tell you why. And they're not giving
Exactly.
solid reasons. So it's very, um, on a humorous note, the first time I read this, I wrote down Dolores Umbridge. It made me think of when she comes in Harry Potter and the prisoner, no, Order of the Phoenix. Oh my gosh, wrong book. Oy. Um, and she creates the educational decrees, and she comes in and tries to overhaul Hogwarts. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
that Elder Gilbert is Umbridge
Yeah.
because she's like the most evil person in the Harry Potter universe. And it talks about some quotes from him, from previous interviews, that he's trying to make sure that a church school does not move too far into the secular realm, which I understand and respect, and that's his job.
Yeah.
But it's just, oh, where is the pendulum? Are we going to swing too far? That's what this is beginning to.
Exactly.
I've
And,
talked a lot. I'm sorry.
no, and that was my concern in reading through this is just like what you said. I understand this is a private institution. It's a church school. They're able to set their standards. I am not beefing with that in any way, shape, or form. I went to BYU. I signed the honor code. I chose to live by those standards. I chose to go to BYU knowing I would be required to live by those standards. And obviously, if you don't want to live by those standards or feel uncomfortable signing any of that, nobody's forcing you to go to BYU.
Yeah.
Nobody is forcing you to work at BYU. But at this, if the environment there makes you uncomfortable, but what is concerning to me is just like what you said. We swing the pendulum one way, and I think this is true for in multiple areas of life. The pendulum swings one way, it gets too far to the extreme that way, and then it swings extremely back the other way, when it would be nice if it could just stay in the middle and have a much more balanced approach. Because my concern is that obviously this feels on its face very judgy, and we're trying to maybe get away from being less judgy. And if you are going to a university, where there is where there's judgment of the professors, where there's judgment of you living the honor code, because certainly when I was at BYU, there is a range of what some people feel is acceptable under the honor code and some people don't. And so there was constant judgment of, well, in my opinion, you're violating the honor code, and somebody else saying, well, I don't interpret the honor code that way, so I don't feel that I'm violating the honor code. So we have a perpetuation of this just judgment of each other that then I think when students leave BYU tends to perpetuate in wards and things like that. And I'm wanting us to get away from that culture of judgment and more towards a culture of loving each other and realizing, you know what? I'm on my path, you're on your path. I'm not going to worry about what you're doing on your path. I need to focus on my path and what I'm doing and my relationship with the Savior,
Yeah.
not judging your path and your relationship with the
No,
Savior.
there's too much going on in my life to worry about judging anyone
Yeah,
else at this point, to be completely
exactly.
honest. And
Yeah,
I just it is I wrote down multiple times in my what happened to Judge Not,
yeah,
what happened to free agency, what happened to these things. And some of the again, this is a long article. There's a lot of things that are brought in. There's a part that talks about how previously, um, when prospective hires were being interviewed, so they have their interview with their department, and then I think they have an interview like with the board of trustees or something higher level administrative. Then they have a general authority interview, and then it goes to the commission, the educational commission. And when they would go to the general authority interview, whichever general authority, like there's a lot of general authorities, spouses were invited but not required. But now uh, spouses are required to attend. And it also mentions that some leaders have threatened to withhold candidate or continuing faculty ecclesiastical endorsements if spouses are not attending church. Why does someone else's choice affect you? Like that
yeah,
completely goes against
yeah,
the doctrine of agency. Like
yeah,
it's choices. And
yeah,
there are just a lot of things reading through this, that yeah, they're concerned. There was a part that talked about a professor of legal theory, Professor Geddix. I hope I said his name right.
yes.
Did
I
you
had him in law school and
Was he
he was
wonderful?
fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, he taught there for 34 years. So this is someone who is not a stranger to the school. He just retired, so clearly known. And then he was invited back to come and teach a seminar over the summer, and he agreed. And he just thought he'd have to, get a a, a bishop clearance call, just kind
Yeah,
of sign off formality. But no, he was going to be required to have an account with a
a full
background
vetting
investigating term,
process.
and they were going to go through the internet to find every bit of information about him over the last 7 years and things like that and all this stuff. And he ultimately decided, he questioned it and was basically told, um like, if you didn't like it, don't apply. So he
Yeah,
decided to just not do it, because there are parts of his career that he's very proud of, that he knows that maybe the church wouldn't like he worked on the Obergefell Supreme Court
yeah.
decision that legalized same-sex marriage, and he has gay relatives, so he hangs pride flags. So he's like, he didn't want to be dragged through the mud for things like that. And that goes back to agency and this this personal journey we each have. And that's why I love the direction that we've gone with the
Yeah,
I always go back to the For the Strength of Youth standards, because I work with teenagers, and I do not regret the standards that I grew up with, but I grew
yeah,
up when the booklet, it spelled it out. This is what
yeah.
you will do, this is what you will not do. And now I look at my students, and they have it's more about their personal journey and where they're
Hmm.
at, and counseling with your parents and your leaders. And I love that it encourages that personal growth,
Yes.
and that it takes the shame away.
Yeah,
So I this article makes me sad for the professors who felt they have to leave. It makes me sad for the professors who felt they couldn't speak in
yeah.
this interview. Um, there's just I hope there's more to the story that we're not getting that could shed some light, but there's a lot of things that just make me sad in this article and are concerning.
I completely agree with you. So,
And I probably
amen.
should stop getting off. I should get off my soapbox now, because I probably could talk a full hour about this article.
There is a lot to unpack in it, but I think we
Yeah.
did. Hopefully, our listeners will let us know. But I think we did a good job of really kind of addressing what some of the issues are, and what would be really interesting is I hope when the twin siblings record, Matt works for BYU Idaho, so he would be subject to these same standards. I would love to hear his take on this article. So I
I
hope
would love to hear that too. Matt and
I
Melissa,
hope
the challenge is extended.
the challenge is extended, Matt and Melissa. I hope that when you record, that Matt will share his thoughts on this article, because I would like his perspective as actually someone who is a BYU employee and is subject to this. Has Peggy Fletcher Stack, is she making a mountain out of a molehill, or are there some concerns? I think definitely there are some concerns, but
Yeah.
anyway, so hopefully they'll cover it. All right, let's
Let's
move
do
on to a
something
new one.
different.
We're going to move